As it happens, I'm Agent Random, so here's another World Unto You video. And as happens more often than not, it's filled to the brim with spoilers for the whole series, so clear out and freaking play these games if you haven't. If you've been paying attention to the World Unto You content on this channel or have ever oogled the secret reports, you'll probably realize that this series is very lore rich. And while most of our lore info is derived from the secret reports, there is quite a lot that we don't know. Things that never really come up in the main story, so they're never really mentioned or explained by Hanekoma. For instance, there are other beings acting in the shadows that we never properly learn about, but we can still see their footprints hidden deep in the background of both games. So let's discuss the species and hierarchical ranks within this universe and see if there's any fun new conclusions we can draw along the way. Although do keep in mind that since most of this really isn't explained to us in the secret reports, it's going to be pretty speculative on my end. Firstly, there is thankfully a handy-dandy list of species that also shows us how their power levels compare to each other. I'm referring to the original game's ESP'er ranks and Neo's psychic ranks. In the original game, you would gain a minuscule amount of ESP'er points as you played through the game, and if you were clinically insane, you could max it out. No thanks. Neo's much kinder and has its ranks linked to in-game achievements. And for some reason, I also don't have those maxed out. Each list starts with the rank Only Human. This is for all of your normies within the series. People like Makoto, or this girl who is canonically named Aries' friend. Dang, what a sad existence. Aries is basically just Shiki's friend, so that makes you like Shiki's friends. I'm so sorry. But y'all probably don't need me to explain what humans are, so we're moving on. Next up, the rank of Yuri Geller and that one kid from The Matrix, Spoonbender. The series never really focuses in on these kinds of people too much, but I assume that this is the rank for RG folk who come packaged in with the side of some light psychic abilities. While we don't knowingly meet anyone like this in the main story, there are plenty of people like this crawling around Shibuya. Through scanning, you can find a handful of people who seem to be aware of the underground, whether they're able to see noise or reapers with their wings. And keep in mind that reapers don't really keep their wings out in the real ground. This isn't unlike what we're told Joshua's backstory is like in the original game, where Joshua was just your average RG kid, but he could see into the UG. Eventually, he made the choice to enter the Reapers game himself, as living a normal life felt like death to him. Well, this obviously isn't how Joshua entered the game in week 2 of the original game. It could still totally be how Joshua got wrapped up in the underground shenanigans back whenever the heck he became composer. We'll revisit that topic later. But finally, if there did have to be any character that could possibly have any level of psychic ability, my hope and dream is that it's Kendoi. In the original game, it's heavily implied that Kendoi is the person that leaves these boxes behind that you need to collect in the new game plus. Any hints that he maybe possibly knows that Neku's been going through a bit of a hard time? I mean, like, okay, it's possible. Something's up with this man. Oh, also, Ryoji, I guess. This one's a little weird. His official bio describes him as someone with a sixth sense. But as far as I can tell, that isn't even so much as hinted at in the game itself. Like, according to Suzukichi, they're both friends, but that's all I got. The following rank is what happens when either of the two ranks before kick the bucket. Supernatural / Psych User. This is the rank where I speculate most of the more average players that we see go. Right above that is Master Player. We'll label this as the rank for the players who are just a bit extra. Whether they have latent abilities like Nagi, gifts from the heavens like Rindo, or could use every pin before it was cool like Neku. Should a player win the Reapers game and so desire, they will ascend to the following rank, Reaper. Keep in mind that Reapers do have their own hierarchy of ranks, but that's purely a self-contained organizational thing, and most of those ranks do not necessarily have their own ESP'er or psychic rank. The Reaper, ESP'er / psychic rank includes all support Reapers like Tenho, Harrier Reapers like Karya, and Officer Reapers like Konishi. Even though there are noticeable changes in a Reaper's physiology from Harrier to Officer, it's not enough to denote a different tier of existence. Beyond that is the highest Reaper rank achieved through being real good at your job, Conductor. The next 3 ranks are all Angel ranks. Our known ways for a conductor to become an angel are for the conductor to defeat the composer or for an inversion to take place, in which case the conductor is invited to the higher plane to go and become an angel. Although it seems like not all angels go through this process of coming in from the position of the conductor rank. Haz in particular seems to have always been an angel and is actually incapable of understanding lower plane beings. In stark contrast, Hanekoma has an extreme level of social skills and a deep understanding of humans. Beyond this point is when things get real murky. Just like Reapers, Angels have their own internal hierarchy, but trying to figure out that hierarchy is a mess. The next rank up is Composer, with the next rank up being either Angel or Fallen Angel depending on the game. Reminder, Fallen Angel is an angel that has gone rogue like Hanekoma. But understand that since Composers are the rank beneath Angels when Composers themselves are angels, that would mean that Composers are so far beneath the other angels that it's not even accurate to let them share a rank. While Wall Reapers and Officer Reapers are apparently close enough to share a rank. And on top of that, Composers being so far beneath the rank of the other angels doesn't actually make that much sense. Within Neo, it seems very clear that Kubo's position is beneath at least Haz's, and yet Haz's psychic rank is beneath Kubo's? So to be honest, I have no idea what the logic is behind the angel ranks. And then there's also the fact that in between games, Angels and Fallen Angels casually swap spots in the list. And we can't even begin to know why that's the case, because aside from the psychic ranks, Fallen Angels aren't mentioned once in Neo. Like, there is a rhyme and a reason behind the angel ranks that the devs apparently know about, but we aren't allowed in on any of that info. Or are we? Through the internet's latent ability of data mining, we learned that both Joshua and Haz are senior advanced grade angels, and Kubo is a junior lower grade angel. That would mean that Joshua and Haz are ranked above Kubo, even though Kubo's psychic rank should rank him above them. So this means that either these ranks are freaking lying to us and Composers are not so far down the angel totem pool that it wouldn't be accurate to let them share a rank with the rest of the angels, or Executors are so low class that they're not even on the psychic rank list. Take your pick. Oh, and since there's no real data for Hanekoma and Neo's files, we can't compare where he as a producer would rank in comparison to Composers and Executors. I would assume that it's above, but man, I don't got a clue anymore. It's here that I want to take a moment to discuss the one character who is most difficult to determine a rank for, Mr. Minami Moto. Legally speaking, he's a player and a former Reaper officer, but it doesn't take much of a glance to see by Neo he's so much more. Unfortunately, we're never really told what the limits of Sho's powers are, but we can make enough observations to draw some sort of conclusion. 1. We know that he was drastically changed in the transition between games. His revival caused, and I quote, a subtle change in his fundamental vibes. Remember, while he was erased at the end of the original main story, he was revived at the end of A New Day by Coco, who I should also add is described by Hanekoma to be more powerful than any Reaper he's ever seen, but that's a whole other can of worms probably. Neo makes a point to show that Minami Moto is incredibly powerful. He's able to just sort of absorb the Soul Pulvis and use its energy to travel to other worlds. He's able to smite Plaguenoids in an instant, which, to be perfectly H with you, does not seem like something that Miss Most Powerful Reaper Coco over here can do. And the only person that's capable of stopping Minami Moto is Neku? Oh, okay, my guess and explanation for this scene is that Neku one-shot Sho due to the nature of his return to Shibuya. Neku would have had to simultaneously travel through different grounds and planes to get from the inverted Shinjuku to underground Shibuya. Just like Sho, that in itself is also an undocumented anomaly that we don't really have any power scale gauging for, so I'll just let that slide. Sho also makes note that he's strong enough now to take down the Composer. Now, that was also his mindset in the first game, and that really didn't go as Sho had planned, but I think that this time around Sho has a much more likely chance of actually being somewhere near the power scale of the Composer. The answer comes to us from a subtle detail in Neo. One thing, and frankly it's one of the few things that the Neo reports do tell us, is the nature of the replay psych. Replay is a psych that's vibes originate from the higher plane. As such, it only is shown to have any sort of effect on the lower planes. Even though Rindo undoes a whole month of time in the real ground and underground, Haz and Hanekoma, who are presumably in the higher plane, seem to be totally unaffected. As for angels that are in the lower planes, they are sent back in time just like any other person in the lower plane, but exhibit an enhanced awareness that allows them to notice exactly when a replay is done. Kubo demonstrates this at the end of the game when he already knows the second that he enters the scene that Rindo was on his second try that day, and Minami Moto also shows this awareness. Right here on day 5 of the first week. Sho doesn't seem to to understand what he's sensing, but he's totally picking up the vibes of the replay just as an angel would. I'd even theorize that he then proceeds to use this to his advantage for the rest of the time that he's helping the Wicked Twisters, since he is directly the reason that Rindo even needs to use replay both of the following times that week. First, he refuses to help ward off the Deep River Society, and secondly, he just doesn't show up to the Susakichi fight. Both of these actions by Sho prompt Rindo to use replay, and on each second go around, Sho helps them as normal, seemingly since he would have picked up the signals from Rindo using replay. I'd imagine that the reasoning behind all this is that he wanted to generate more Soul Pulvis birds to absorb or something. So anyway, with all of that evidence, I'd have to say that Minamimoto is at least composure tier within the ESP'er and Psychic ranks. But who knows, I wouldn't say that it's impossible that he's as powerful as the next tier over too. The penultimate rank in both games is the Demon, and data not found. We've got nothing concrete on demons at all. Technically, we're not even sure that they exist since we've never knowingly seen them. But if demons are supposed to be above angels and fallen angels, and we've only just barely seen a couple of them walking around hidden in plain sight due to the plot of these games, then surely with demons and above, it's super rare to see one, and probably even rarer to be aware that you've seen one. Like I alluded to before, I wouldn't rule out Sho as being a demon. There's nothing to disprove it, especially since we don't have a firm understanding of demons or Sho. But in the whole series, there is a singular point in which demons are very briefly mentioned. In the final chapter of Neo, Haz explains to Rindo that he exorcised Kubo, which sorta just deleted him from reality. Haz makes a point of notating that exorcism is very different than erasure, and Rindo makes the comment here in response to hearing that Kubo is exorcised like a demon. For the unaware, exorcism is the act of expelling an evil spirit or demon from a place, and in many religions, it's done via the aid of an angel. Keep in mind though, that exorcism is just expelling. It ain't a murder move. So more likely than not, Kubo's just server banned from the lower planes and is hanging out in the higher plane. Or more likely, he shares a cell in angel jail with Hanekoma or something. But going back on track, in this series, it's shown to us that angels can also be exorcised. The two possible conclusions I could see being drawn here are that angels and demons are biologically close enough to one another that the demon removal move is also the angel removal move, kinda like how erasure is used for both reapers and players. Or that since angels are holy beings or whatever, they are technically capable of exorcising really anyone they wanted to. This is where we really begin to run out of stuff brought up in the main story to build upon, so we have to look way deeper. Hanekoma describes in the original secret reports that the higher plane beings have a much higher imagination than those in the lower planes, partially due to the fact that you'd need a high imagination to even win the Reapers game. Like legit, if you somehow make it to the end of the Reapers game with a low imagination, they will just straight up erase you. The higher your imagination is, the greater influence your art will have. Hanekoma uses this to his advantage as the anomalous artist's cat. So I began to look for traces of beings beyond angels within the art of the series. And this in particular is what I meant when I said that you could see the footprints of these other beings. The original game's starting battle theme, Long Dream, makes mention of angels and devils. And we know for a fact that the music we hear in-game is real music that is listened to in-universe. Aside from being purchasable in shops, Fred is actually what confirms it. One of Fred's common speech patterns in battle is to reference various popular songs. And in a press release before Neo came out, it is stated that Fred named the Wicked Twisters after one of his favorite songs. This, of course, is the in-game song Twister. So I think that it's at least a fun headcanon to imagine that Long Dream's lyrics are influenced by angels and demons. And surely it's not the only one. The song Game Over has lyrics pretty tied to Hanekoma, and oh hey look, he's an angel that can influence art, how interesting. And then there's the final rank. In the original game, it's called the God. In Neo, it's called Uber Psychic. And I'm really just gonna assume that these are the same thing because the evidence I have to go off of for their existence is already beyond thinner than thin. Obviously, we've never knowingly met a God, so we'll just have to look at art again to see if there is any influence from beyond. And as it happens, happens, there are 2 pin sets in the original game that have exactly what we're looking for. Might I introduce the Cat set and the Eden set, both of which come from the Gatito brand, which is Hanekoma's brand. First, let's talk about the Eden set. 1 jump from Eden, 1 skip from Eden, 1 hop from Eden, 1 step from Eden, and Eden's door. The descriptions for each of these pins tell an ancient story. This story is commonly accepted to be the tale of Shibuya's first composer. I'll just read it out loud. A lamenting goddess left this prophecy for the 5 warring kingdoms below, that their world would end in Blackset's sun fire. Yet her prophecy held hope. The goddess had promised to all living things, great and small, a saving light to ward off their doom. But the 5 kings would not believe her. So one sought strength and found futility. Another sank into mindless wisdom. In the end, the king's delusions led them to a chamber of reckoning, where their unspent chaos brought fear and woe to all. Now, as the boy stands before Eden, the 5 kings in his wake, the goddess rewards his balanced judgment with her light. You also want a Shinjuku prequel game? Come on, when's the 5 Warring Kingdoms prequel game? So apparently, long ago, a bunch of kingdoms went to war and a goddess took pity on them or something and promised them a saving light. And that's light with a capital L, proper noun. But all the kings of the kingdoms ignored her and tried to help themselves, to their own downfall. The kings discovered the Room of Reckoning, you know, that place where the final boss of the original game and the Throne of Shibuya are. Joshua describes it as a room that contains the very fabrics of Shibuya. But these dudes were like mega corrupt by this point, which influenced all to be full of negative emotions. And when it says all, I assume that to mean at least all of Shibuya. We know that when a composer is seated on this throne, their feelings have a heavy influence on Shibuya. So get a bunch of corrupt people in here and it's bound to have a negative effect on the territory. But then a boy appears. He leaves the 5 kings in his wake, whatever that means. He might have killed them, beat them in Tin Pin, who knows. And as a result of him being not corrupted, the goddess gifted him her light. Again, capital L. We can assume that this is how Shibuya's first composer came to be. And if you're feeling bold, you could say that this boy is Joshua. That would totally contradict Josh's origin story that we got in week 2, but that was already at least partially a lie, so it's really anyone's call. The second inkling of the gods that we get is in the cat set, which comprises of Righty Cat, Brainy Cat, and Lefty Cat. Their descriptions label each of them as merciless power, fierce courage, and sinister wisdom, which is high-key a reference to the Triforce from The Legend of Zelda. Yeah, most of this lore so far has been rooted in religion and mythology. Now here's some Zelda lore. Like honestly, at first I thought that maybe the pieces of the Triforce were a reference to some sort of religious thing that I was just unaware of, and the cat set was also referencing that. But no, Hanekoma's a Zelda fan. In actuality, I'd imagine that this reference is here due to the original World Ends With You being a Nintendo exclusive game. But there's still plenty of meaning to be interpreted here. In The Legend of Zelda, the Triforce is a relic created by the 3 golden goddesses, Din, Nehru, and Faeror. It's like the source of all power in Hyrule or something. Protection duty for the Triforce is outsourced to the goddess Hylia, who then proceeded to outsource it to generations of her reincarnation, Zelda, because apparently no one likes dealing with this thing. So the concept of the Triforce is god tier, and should anything like it exist in the World Ends With You universe, it would have the power from the top of the ESP'er ranks. The Triforce is uber psychic. Additionally, the pin descriptions say that should power, wisdom, and courage be combined, it shall break the god's spell over all. And that's very specifically gods with the apostrophe after the S, plural possessive. As in, there is a society of gods that have a spell over all. Over angels, only humans, everyone. All. This next part is definitely drifting a bit away from theory and speculation and entering the realm of wacky headcanon, because I don't think this is what the devs had intended, but I do think that it would actually explain every single dumb thing about the continuity in this series. Alright, so it's no secret that the continuity in this series is whack. Like, the events of Final Remix seem to be what preceded Neo, but the world and time period don't check out in the slightest. Like, the simplest way I can think to explain the World Ends With You timeline is that the first game takes place in 2007 2007, and the next game takes place 3 years later, in 2021. And it's not like the events of the anime are what preceded Neo. The events and lore of the anime do not line up with Neo at all, and on top of that, going off of how the 104 building uses its 2019 logo, the anime has to take place at most 2 years before Neo. And yes, I know I'm deducing timelines based off the 104 logo of all things, just let me have this. I kid you not, I spent so long hyper-analyzing the 104 logo across this series, it's not even funny. But if gods really have a spell over all, then that might be the key to explaining the bridge between Final Remix and Neo. The original Secret Reports discuss a phenomenon called metamorphosis. This is what occurs when a composer has a change of heart and the territory that they control bends to their will. It's specifically described as a city being destroyed and replaced. So what if a god had a similar change of heart and the world changed? All the events of 2007 still totally happened 3 years before Neo, but now the world has been changed by a god to now be 14 years in the future, leaving all the inhabitants of the world none the wiser. Or are they? Because most characters seamlessly transferred time periods. Like, the prince still got popular off a blog and nobody questions that. And yet, Hanekoma writes in Neo's reports that he may have to consult Kaie on how he should continue his art in a digital age. Hanekoma, a higher plane being who is already aware of the influence that gods have, is the one character that shows signs of needing to adjust to the change. And that's what I speculate may be the smoking gun that shows a god is the reason for Neo's 14-year time jump. Well, that's all I can find on gods, demons, and the rest. Well, actually, there are 2 things that I want to mention real quick just to have my bases covered. There are also technically aliens in this series which are encountered in the DS's Mingle mode. I kinda doubt that they're really anything important though. They really are just in the DS version. They were removed from Solo Remix. I really only mentioned them because surely somebody would have asked if I didn't. And secondly, yes, Shou's taboo form is referred to as having the power of a god. Shou already had a whole segment in this video, and yeah, no, Taboo Show was definitely not god tier if he got trashed on by Joshua. But anyway, are there any other sightings of gods and demons lurking around that you've noticed? Do you have any other theories regarding these unseen forces? Feel free to go wild with speculation. I doubt Square is gonna give us a proper answer anytime soon. See y'all in the next video.